Today, I'm gonna tell you about how I signed up for yoga thinking I'd meet flexible heartbreak machines, but ended up in surgery explaining to my urologist why little Stallion got twisted like a pretzel. I'm Nick, the Stallion, Navarro, but my friends call me Stolly. One day, I might tell you why, if you can handle it. Strap in, puppies. This ride's about to crash beautifully. My puppies. This happened back when I was going through what I like to call my enlightenment phase. You know how it is. Sometimes a stallion needs to explore his spiritual side, especially when Captain Cockblock keeps telling everyone that I only think with little Stolly and never with my actual brain. So there I was, walking past this yoga studio downtown, when I see this sign in the window: yoga classes, new students welcome. Now, my first thought wasn't about inner peace or chakras or any of that Zen nonsense. My brain immediately went, yoga equals hot women in tight yoga pants doing flexible moves that would make a stallion's imagination run wild. Me, being the smooth operator I am, immediately walked in to sign up for what I was convinced would be a den of flexible TV goddesses just waiting for Uncle Stolly's legendary charm to sweep them off their yoga mats. The girl at the front desk was cute, but she had that wholesome yoga instructor vibe that screamed friendship territory from a mile away. She hands me this schedule and says the beginner classes are perfect for someone like me who's never done yoga before. Perfect for someone like me. Puppies, if she only knew that Uncle Stolly's flexibility extends far beyond just touching his toes, if you know what I mean. I signed up for the 6 a.m. Monday morning class because the girl mentioned it was their most popular beginner session. In my mind, I was already picturing myself surrounded by gorgeous heartbreak machines in those tight workout outfits, all impressed by my natural athletic stallion abilities. Monday morning comes, and there I am at 5:45 a.m., dressed in my tightest athletic shorts to show off little Stolly's general region, hair perfectly styled, and smelling like I'd bathed in cologne. I walk into that studio ready to unleash my legendary charm on an army of flexible lip gloss legends. Puppies. What I found was not exactly what Uncle Stolly had in mind. The room was full of women, all right. About 15 of them. But every single one of them looked like they could be my grandmother. I'm talking silver hair, orthopedic shoes, and conversations about their grandchildren's college applications. The youngest person in that room, aside from yours truly, was probably pushing 70. There I was, standing in the doorway like an idiot, when this Zen goddess walks in from the back room. This was clearly the instructor, and my puppies, she was a national treasure. Long brown hair, perfect smile, and that whole peaceful earth goddess vibe that somehow made little Stolly stand at attention despite being surrounded by enough senior citizens to populate a retirement home. Trish, that was her name, 24 years old, and looking like she'd stepped out of some meditation magazine designed specifically to test Uncle Stolly's self-control. She welcomed me to the class with this warm, genuine smile, and I swear even the grandmas turned to check out the new guy who'd wandered into their territory. Now, a lesser man might have turned around and walked right back out. But Uncle Stolly never backs down from a challenge, even when that challenge involves doing downward dog poses surrounded by women old enough to have babysat my parents. The class started, and let me tell you, these old ladies were flexible in ways that defied everything I thought I knew about aging. There was this one grandma, Margaret, who could twist herself into positions that would make a circus performer jealous. Meanwhile, there's Uncle Stolly, sweating like a pig just trying to touch his toes without falling over. But here's where things got interesting, my puppies. These grandmas, they adopted me, like, immediately. By the end of that first class, Margaret was pinching my cheek and telling me what a nice young man I was. Another one, Dolores, was asking if I had a girlfriend and telling me how Trish was such a lovely girl who worked so hard and deserved a nice young man like me. I could see where this was heading, and Uncle Stolly was not about to waste an opportunity. Over the next few weeks, I became their unofficial grandson. They'd save me a spot in class, offer me homemade cookies afterward, and most importantly, they started working as my personal wingwomen with Trish. Margaret would make comments during class about how strong and dedicated I was. Dolores would stay after sessions to tell Trish stories about my kind heart and how I helped her with her yoga mat. Another grandma, Ruth, would randomly mention to Trish how single and successful I was, despite the fact that I was working part-time at a sporting goods store and living in a studio apartment. The best part was listening to their whispered strategies. I'd be in child's pose, and I could hear them plotting behind me. One day I heard Margaret whisper to the group, "He's perfect for our Trish. Look how gentle he is with his poses." Then Dolores chimed in, "And he's so patient with us old ladies. That shows character," Ruth added, "plus he's got those strong arms." Trish needs a man who can protect her. Puppies. These grandmas were running a better wingman operation than Captain Cockblock ever managed, and they were doing it with military precision. Meanwhile, I was actually getting decent at yoga. Turns out all those years of, let's call it manual dexterity training, had given me pretty good flexibility. Who knew that sabbatical self-care sessions were actually athletic preparation? Trish started noticing my improvement, and would give me these encouraging smiles during difficult poses. Sometimes she'd come over to adjust my form, and her hands on my back or shoulders would send little Stallion into immediate alert status. Thank God for loose yoga pants I was wearing that day, if you know what I mean. After about a month of this grandmother-assisted courtship, Margaret cornered me after class. You know, Stallion, that Trish girl has been asking about you. Oh really? What kind of asking? She wanted to know if you were seeing anyone, and if you might be interested in some private lessons to work on your form. My puppies, I nearly dropped my yoga mat right there. Private lessons with Trish meant alone time. Alone time meant opportunities for Uncle Stallion to work his legendary charm without an audience of senior citizens cheering him on. I spent the next week working up the courage to actually ask her. Every class, I'd plan out what I was going to say, but then she'd smile at me, or adjust my warrior pose, and my brain would turn to mush. Finally, Margaret got tired of my cowardice. After class, she walked right up to Trish and said, "Our Stallion here has been working so hard on his flexibility. Don't you think some one-on-one instruction would help him reach the next level?" Trish looked at me with those beautiful Zen goddess eyes, and said, "I'd love to work with you privately, Nick. My schedule's pretty flexible. We could do a session at your place, if that's more comfortable." My place? Private yoga session. With a TV goddess who probably knew positions that weren't even in regular yoga books. I think I managed to stammer out something like, "That sounds amazing. How about Saturday afternoon?" "Perfect. I'll bring my mat, and we can work on some advanced poses that might be too challenging for the group setting." Advanced poses. My puppies. Little Stallion was already planning the victory celebration. The grandmas were practically glowing with pride as I walked out of that studio. I heard Margaret whisper to the group, "Mission accomplished, ladies." Saturday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the entire week preparing my studio apartment for what I was already calling in my mind the Zen Den of seduction. I bought candles, some of those bamboo plants, and even downloaded meditation music to set the proper atmosphere. But then Captain Cockblock had to go and complicate things. He showed up Friday night with this ancient book under his arm. "Stallion, you said you wanted to impress this yoga girl, right?" "Yeah, what's your point, Cap?" "Well, I was cleaning out my cousin's stuff, and I found this. It's called the Kama Sutra, ancient Indian wisdom about positions." He hands me this worn-out book full of illustrations that would make a Renaissance painter blush. These are like advanced yoga poses, but for, you know, if you really want to blow this girl's mind, combine your new yoga skills with some of these moves. She'll think you're some kind of spiritual sex guru. My puppies, looking at those drawings, I could see the genius in Cap's logic. Trish was into flexibility and ancient wisdom. What could be more impressive than showing her that Uncle Stallion had mastered both yoga and the ancient arts of romantic flexibility? I spent that entire Friday night studying that book like I was cramming for the most important exam of my life. There were positions in there that required engineering degrees to understand, but there was one that caught my attention, something the book called the Sacred Lotus of Eternal Bliss. It was basically a lotus pose, but with a very intimate twist that would showcase both my newfound yoga flexibility and little Stallion's legendary capabilities. Saturday afternoon arrives, and so does Trish. She looked absolutely incredible in her yoga outfit, carrying her mat and a water bottle, radiating that peaceful Zen energy that made my studio apartment feel like some kind of spiritual sanctuary. We started with basic poses, stretching, breathing exercises, some simple positions to warm up. Everything was going perfectly. Trish was impressed with my improvement, complimenting my form and balance. That's when my overconfidence kicked in. "You know what, Trish? I've been practicing some more advanced techniques. Want to see something I've been working on?" She looked intrigued. "Sure. I love seeing students push their boundaries." I pulled out that book and flipped to the Sacred Lotus page. This is an ancient position that combines traditional lotus pose with enhanced flexibility. It's supposed to be the ultimate test of mind-body connection. Trish studied the illustration, and I swear I saw a little blush creep across her cheeks. "That's very advanced, Nick. Are you sure you're ready for something that complex?" "I've been practicing. Trust me." My puppies. What happened next was one of the most spectacular disasters in the history of Uncle Stallion's romantic adventures. I got into the lotus position, legs crossed, looking all zen and spiritual. So far so good. Then came the tricky part. The book said to maintain the lotus while transitioning into what it called the twist of eternal connection. I started the twist, rotating my torso while keeping my legs locked in lotus position. Everything was still under control. Trish was watching with this mix of amazement and concern, which I interpreted as being impressed with my spiritual dedication. But then I decided to really show off. The book mentioned something about deepening the twist for maximum spiritual and physical connection. So I twisted harder, and, my puppies, I felt something in little Stolly's neighborhood that was definitely not supposed to happen during yoga. It was like someone had taken my family jewels and decided to practice their rope tying skills. The pain was immediate and absolutely devastating. I let out a scream that probably shattered every meditation crystal in a 3-block radius. Trish jumped up from her mat. "Nick, what's wrong? What happened?" I couldn't even form words. I was rolling around on my yoga mat, clutching little Stolly's general area, making sounds that would traumatize a banshee. That's when Trish, being the responsible yoga instructor she was, called 911. The paramedics arrived to find me still twisted up like a pretzel, crying tears of pain, while Trish explained that I'd been attempting some kind of advanced spiritual position, and something had gone terribly wrong. One of the EMT guys took a look at my situation and immediately knew what had happened. Testicular torsion. We need to get him to the hospital now. Pause to reflect on just how twisted this got. By the way, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. It really helps me keep these coming. Testicular torsion, my puppies. Apparently little Stolly and his companions had gotten so twisted up during my spiritual flexibility demonstration that they'd literally tied themselves in a knot that was cutting off blood flow. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens, medical terminology I didn't understand, and Trish holding my hand while repeatedly apologizing for encouraging me to try advanced poses. At the hospital, they rushed me into surgery. The doctor explained that testicular torsion is a medical emergency, and if they didn't untwist everything within a few hours, I could lose little Stolly and his companions permanently. My puppies, lying there on that gurney, waiting to go into surgery, all I could think was, this is how Uncle Stolly's legendary career ends. Not in a blaze of romantic glory, but because I tried to impress a yoga instructor with moves from a book that was probably older than my grandparents. The surgery took about an hour. When I woke up, everything was still attached, but little Stolly was definitely going to be out of commission for a while. The doctor said I'd need several weeks of recovery before any athletic activities. I was lying there in my hospital bed, contemplating the complete destruction of my dignity, when I heard familiar voices in the hallway. "Is he all right? We came as soon as we heard." It was Margaret's voice. Then Dolores. "We brought fruit. Hospital food is terrible for recovery." My puppies, the entire yoga class had shown up. 15 grandmas filed into my hospital room carrying flowers, fruit baskets, and enough get-well cards to stock a Hallmark store. Margaret patted my hand. "You poor dear. Trish told us what happened. She feels terrible about encouraging you to try that advanced pose." Dolores leaned in closer. "Between you and me, sweetie, is everything still, working properly down there?" Ruth nodded seriously. "It's important for a young man like you to maintain full functionality. You'll want children someday." I wanted to disappear into that hospital bed. Here I was, explaining to a room full of grandmothers that yes, little Stolly was expected to make a full recovery, while trying not to die of embarrassment. The best part was when the doctor came in to check on me. These grandmas immediately surrounded him, like they were consulting specialists about their own grandson. "Doctor, will this affect his fertility?" Margaret wanted to know. "What about his romantic capabilities?" The poor doctor looked like he'd wandered into the world's most uncomfortable family reunion. After the grandmas finally left, promising to bring me homemade soup and more fruit, I was alone with my thoughts and my bandaged dignity. That's when the nurse brought in a flower arrangement. Beautiful white lilies with a card attached. I opened the card, expecting maybe an apology or get well wishes from Trish. "I hope you recover quickly and completely, in all aspects. Your dedication to yoga is admirable, even if your execution needs work. Maybe we can stick to basic poses next time. Get well soon, Trish." Next time. She wrote next time, my puppies. But here's where Uncle Stolly's story takes its usual turn toward complete disaster. There never was a next time. Captain Cockblock came to visit me at home after my recovery. "So Stolly, how was your private yoga session?" "Cap, let me give you some life advice. When someone offers you a book of ancient sexual positions, Maybe check if those positions were designed for people who aren't professional contortionists. That bad, huh? Let's just say I now understand why some knowledge was meant to stay ancient. And why yoga instructors always tell you to listen to your body. Apparently mine was screaming stop, but I was too focused on impressing a TV goddess to hear it. Did she at least seem interested before you? You know? She sent flowers to the hospital. Flowers with a card that mentioned next time. So she still wants to see you? That's what I thought too. But when I went back to class after my recovery, things were different. Trish was polite, professional, but there was this awkward distance between us. She'd smile and nod, but avoided any real conversation. During poses, she'd help other students, but somehow always missed adjusting my form. Margaret pulled me aside after the third class back. She feels terrible about what happened, sweetie. She thinks she pushed you too hard, encouraged you to try something dangerous. But it wasn't her fault. It was my stupid idea to mix yoga with that book. We know that, dear. But she doesn't. She keeps saying she should have recognized you weren't ready for advanced work. That's the story, my puppies. Another glorious disaster in the legendary chronicles of Uncle Stallion. I learned that day that some positions are better left to ancient masters, that good intentions can't fix guilt-induced awkwardness, and that sometimes the best wingmen come in the form of grandmothers, who can't fix everything with homemade cookies. Margaret still saves me a spot in yoga class, and the grandmas still treat me like their honorary grandson. Dolores brings me extra cookies, and asks about little Stolly's recovery progress. Ruth bought me a book about yoga safety that I definitely should have read before attempting the sacred lotus of eternal bliss. As for Trish, she eventually transferred to teaching the evening classes. I heard from Margaret that she told the studio owner she needed a schedule change for personal reasons. We both knew what those personal reasons were. Sometimes I catch her looking at me during the rare times our paths cross at the studio, and there's this mix of concern and guilt in her eyes that makes little Stolly's neighborhood ache, and not from the surgery. Stallion never backs down, unless his stallions get twisted. This isn't even the craziest thing that happened to me. So stick around, subscribe, hit the like, and I'll tell you the rest. And hey, got a story you want me to read as Stolly himself? Drop it in the comments. Until the next embarrassment. Nick the Stallion, Navarro.